welfare state, the idea that we're giving people things that they didn't earn. But we're not talking about that with this. We're talking about the more European model. The idea is that the government provides cradle-to-grave services. When you think about it, maybe this would be education, maybe this would be childcare, maybe this would be health services. I mean, the sense of it is that if you are able to focus on the things that you want to do, and indeed, when you think about it, the government provides things for you that you need, you will be better protected. We're all kind of in this together is maybe the European model. Now, what was the problem with the welfare state?
They collect like really high taxes.
Yeah, they do. Do you remember a percentage? Can anybody ballpark it?
50%.
Yeah, 50% or upwards of 50. So basically what we're saying is that for every dollar that you earn, Sam, they're going to collect over 50 cents in taxes. And this is where we get into that debate. Is it me that can spend my money better for me, or is it the government that can spend my money better for me? And a lot of people in the U.S. would say, let me spend my money, let me go out and find a better deal, whereas other folks would say, you know what, I'm not really qualified for this, I trust the government to make that decision for me. Go ahead.
Would Canada probably be the best example of a welfare state?
I think Canada, you could go into a lot of the European states as well. You can go into a lot of the European states. And in fact, I had skipped this before. In theory, the U.S. has traditionally been a laissez-faire state, but in fact, increasingly, the United States is getting more and more in the economy. So maybe we're beginning to tilt a little bit in that direction too. A little bit in that direction. Go ahead, Ray, I saw your hand.
No, I'm just going to ask some examples.
Examples, okay. Socialism, what was socialism? What's that?
It's a team.
All of us are brothers and sisters.
I have a quote from each according to his ability to each according to his needs.
Yeah. This was about the time that the socialist candidate, I believe, came into the other class, and they wanted to come into mine. I really thought that y'all would kill them. But in fact, socialism, in terms of regulation and redistribution, do socialists believe in government regulation of the economy?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do they believe in government redistribution?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I had given you that race analogy, the starting line versus the finish line. And that really comes into appropriate example here. Because when you think about it, the socialists are basically going to focus on the finish line in this analogy. Everybody should be able to end at roughly about the same place. Everybody should have something. We're all brothers and sisters. We're all in this together. If some people are more gifted, they should sacrifice more to uplift those that aren't as gifted. And the chapter mentions the old Soviet Union. It also mentions Cuba as examples. And I think I had given y'all kind of an interesting example from both a video clip and an article. Do you remember the example that I'd given y'all?
The article was free riders on the taxes of others.
Free riders on the taxes of others would actually maybe be a pretty good example of this. There was maybe a better one too, but what was the gist behind free riders on the taxes of others? What percentage of Americans, 47% of Americans do not pay any federal income tax at all. So when you put this into context, that's basically saying that barely over half of the country pays taxes. So when you hear this 1%, they need to pay more, there is some truth to that. But some people would argue everybody needs to pay more, including that 47% that's not paying anything because there isn't an incentive for them to do. I'm not making a political statement, Dan. I know you look uneasy, but that's really what one of the arguments is. The other piece to this, though, was actually the mortgage article. I believe it was called Are We Our Brother's Keepers? What was the story in that one?
About the bank bailouts and how people who were buying these houses and couldn't afford them ended up getting foreclosed.
Who was the guy that got really angry on MSNBC?
Rick Santelli.
Rick Santelli got on there and he used the water analogy. Do you remember what the water analogy was?
No.
The quote that he gave was, instead of rewarding the people that drink the water, we should reward the people that carry the water. And do you remember what he referred to the people that foreclosed? How did he refer to them?
Losers.
He referred to them as losers and the losers' mortgages. Now, I don't want to be careful. I don't want to sound like I'm coming down on one side or the other. But Santelli's argument, if you remember, was instead of bailing out the losers, we need to get them out of those houses and allow the people that can actually pay for them to take them. And in fact, what was the problem with those mortgages? What was the typical situation that we saw?
Before the whole like recession hit.
yeah. What were they doing?
They were pretty much like investing into buying these like houses way over their salaries,
Mm-hmm.
and then selling it at like before the mortgage was due.
Yeah, they were. I want to say that the article said it was like a person that was earning $40,000 a year. Do you remember how much the house was worth?
Like $500.
Like $500,000, and it was obvious that they wouldn't be able to do this. And if you remember on this, there were some folks that said the banks are preying on these people, and in fact the government needs to provide a bailout because these people that signed these mortgages were victims, and there is truth to that. Other folks like Santelli are saying, wait a minute, you knew better when you signed into that. And if you're taking a risk and if you're trying to scam the system, you need to stand on your own 2 feet. And if I'm paying my mortgage, then damn it, I shouldn't have to pay for your mortgage too. If you remember, that's what Santelli was saying. And that's where you start getting into socialism. Are we our brother's keepers? If our brothers and sisters cannot pay their mortgages, do we have a responsibility to bail them out and pay for ours and theirs as well? Some folks would say yes, some folks would say no. Throw them and their kids out in the street. And some of you in class said this, and it sounded horrible when you said it. But then others of you said, you know what, we need to bail them out because they made a mistake. But they made a mistake that they maybe should have known better than, and that's not fair to the people that pay their mortgages each month too. What was statism? Which actually, to make a short story long, was Jessica's original question. What did statists believe in terms of regulation and redistribution?
Cut the dead weight. That's what I've
Cut
written
the
down.
dead weight.
That's what I've written down in my notes.
Good Lord, were you drunk then too? You're really scaring me right now. Okay, statists, in terms of regulation, did they believe in regulating? Yes, they did. They believed in regulating very, very strongly to within an inch of your lives, in fact. And did they believe in redistribution?
No.
No, they did not. The good example of the old statist that the chapter gives was what society? It was Nazi Germany. And if you remember, in Nazi Germany, you could make a hell of a lot of money as long as you did what you were told. But what was Hitler's view? Or the statist view more generally? And I forget exactly who was my statist in class. I can't remember who the statist was. No, wasn't Jorge. Yeah, it was Min. That's right. Zoom in on Min right now. Zoom in on Min. Min was the class example of the statist. Do you remember what the mindset was?
Cut the dead weight.
Cut the dead weight. But give me more examples. Who would they have not taken care of?
The elderly, the sick,
The elderly, the sick, the disabled. It went on into the gays. I mean, it went on into all sorts of groups. And the gypsies, in fact. Hitler's mindset, and Min's evidently mindset as well, was, don't make that face. I mean, we're all friends here. I mean, the mindset is that if you are not contributing to society, then in fact you are draining from society. And actually there's a little bit of Rick Santelli in this. If you're drinking the water rather than carrying it, Hitler would say, we need to cut you loose if in fact, when you think about it, you don't have family that can provide for you because the state is not going to provide for you. I had 2 or 3 articles that were dealing with this. Do you remember?
One of them was assisted suicide.
One of them was the assisted suicide article. What was that one?
Like a
Dog.
87-year-old man.
It was a married couple that they were both really old, and the wife was sick with something, and she was going to die, and the husband wanted to die alongside with her.
It was, yeah, and you know what? I don't believe I've got that article added. I'm glad you brought that one up. I'll make sure that it's in there. Do you remember what country it was or how this worked?
Was it Oregon?
Oh, Switzerland?
Oregon?
No, they're trying to make it legal in Oregon.
Yeah, it wasn't in Oregon. I promise you that. When you look back on this, what was the story? Because, I mean, assisted suicide is typically when somebody that's ill, permanently ill, debilitatingly ill, there's not going to be a cure on this, that they, in fact, would be allowed to end their life early on their own terms before the suffering turned them into something that they weren't. How did this work in this example that we were talking about in class? What was different?
The husband wasn't ill.
Oh, he was, yeah.
The husband wasn't ill. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. If you go back and you look at this, you had the husband, Edward, that was 85. You had the wife, Joan, that was 74. In fact, they did go to Switzerland as you look at this. And in this instance, she had the ailment. She decided that she wanted to commit suicide or assisted suicide. And then he, because they had been married for decades and decades and decades, decided that he wanted to do it too. And when you look at this, the article was talking about, wow, it's Romeo and Juliet for them to decide.